The courtroom was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that feels like it's hiding something. A little girl sat trembling in the front row, her fingers twisting the corner of a worn-out ribbon. Beside the judge's stand stood a police officer, and his German shepherd, calm, steady, trained to read danger before any human could. Then it happened. The girl rose, walked toward the dog, and adjusted his sitting position. Just a tiny movement, soft and innocent. The officer froze. That wasn't random. It was a signal. 3 short gestures, 3 long, 3 short again. S-O-S. It was the same pattern he'd once taught her, just for fun, when everything was still safe. Now, in the heart of a courtroom, it was a desperate cry for help. What no one else saw was the danger lurking right there, in the smirk of the man on trial. And what happened next would prove that sometimes heroes don't wear badges. Sometimes they wear fur. Morning sunlight spilled over the quiet town's police training yard, turning the chain-link fences into lines of gold. The air smelled faintly of dust, leather, and the sharp bite of disinfectant, the scent of discipline. Officer Daniels stood in the middle of the yard, shoulders squared, his gloved hand raised. Beside him, his German shepherd, Rex, sat perfectly still, alert eyes fixed on his handler, every muscle humming with focus. Sit, stay, watch. Daniel's voice was low, steady, not commanding, but respectful, the kind of tone that spoke of years of partnership, not ownership. Rex didn't move, not a twitch. Daniels gave a subtle signal, just a tilt of the head, almost invisible. The dog shifted instantly, circling behind a decoy, eyes locked, reading every unspoken cue. There was no shouting, no harsh correction, only trust, the silent language between man and dog that went deeper than words. From the viewing area, a small group of children pressed against the fence, wide-eyed. They were visiting from the local elementary school, a treat arranged by their teacher to show them real heroes. Some whispered excitedly, others pointed at the dog's precision. But one little girl stood apart from the group, silent. Lila. She was small for her age, with soft brown hair pulled into uneven pigtails and a blue ribbon fraying at the ends. While the others laughed, Lila watched, her eyes calm, steady, and far too thoughtful for an 8-year-old. When Daniels called for a break, he unclipped Rex's leash, letting the dog stretch. He turned to answer a question from the teacher, but when he looked back, Rex wasn't by his side. The German shepherd was standing just a few feet away, nose lowered, tail wagging slowly, in front of Lila. The children gasped, but Lila didn't flinch. She didn't squeal or pull back like the others might have. Instead, she lowered herself onto her knees, her small hands resting on her lap. Rachel, slow. For a moment, it was as if time paused. Just the girl and the dog, staring at each other in quiet understanding. Daniels started to step forward, ready to call Rex back. But then he stopped. Lila reached out, not to pet, but to gesture. 2 gentle taps on Rex's paw, one on his shoulder. Daniels recognized the rhythm immediately, one of the early hand signals they used in K-9 training. Rex responded, shifting posture, ears perking, tail dropping into neutral. The officer frowned slightly, impressed. "That's not coincidence," he murmured under his breath. The teacher, unaware of the small exchange, clapped her hands. "All right, everyone. Let's thank Officer Daniels for showing us how brave police dogs can be." The children chorused a messy thank you, but Lila was still looking at Rex. The dog tilted his head, almost mirroring her expression. Then she did something that took Daniels completely by surprise. She leaned in, pressed her forehead gently against Rex's, and whispered something. Rex's ears twitched. When she finally stood up, she turned toward Daniels. For the first time, she smiled, a small, cautious smile that felt heavier than it should have. She walked up to him, her little fingers brushing the edge of his jacket, as if she were tracing a thought. "Thank you, officer," she said softly. Daniels crouched to her level, his voice kind but curious. "You've met a police dog before, haven't you?" Lila hesitated, then shook her head. "No, but they understand things people don't." Her eyes flicked toward Rex, who was sitting patiently beside him now, tail sweeping lightly across the ground. "Dogs listen to hearts," she whispered, so quiet he almost missed it. "Not mouths." And before he could respond, she turned and ran to rejoin her class. Daniels remained crouched for a moment, watching her go. That single sentence looped in his mind. Dogs listen to hearts, not mouths. He'd spent years training dogs to respond to precision, obedience, and command. But what this little girl said, it wasn't just poetic. It was true. Rex didn't obey because of words. He obeyed because of trust, because of what lay beneath them. As the class lined up to leave, Rex let out a low rumble. Not aggression, but something thoughtful, as if he too was reluctant to see her go. Daniels scratched behind his ear. "What's that, boy? You like her?" Rex's tail gave a slow wag. Daniels chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, me too. She's got something about her, huh?" The bell rang in the distance, echoing across the empty yard as the children disappeared through the gate. The sun climbed higher, but that quiet moment, a girl, a dog, and an unspoken connection, stayed behind like an imprint on the dust. Later that day, as Daniels locked up the training yard, he found a folded scrap of paper near the gate. Childlike handwriting sprawled across it in uneven lines. "For Rex, because he listens," with a tiny heart drawn beside it. He smiled, tucking it into his pocket. That night, long after the precinct had gone still, Daniels sat by Rex's kennel, turning the paper over in his hands. He didn't know why, but something about that little girl felt fragile, like someone who had learned to be quiet because the world hadn't listened enough. Rex nudged his hand, and Daniels sighed. "Guess we both heard something today, huh?" The German shepherd rested his head on the officer's knee, eyes soft, loyal, understanding. In the silence, that whispered line drifted back through his thoughts again, almost like a prophecy he didn't yet understand. Dogs listen to hearts, not mouths. 3 weeks later, the echo of boots on marble replaced the laughter of children. The police training yard felt a lifetime away. Officer Daniels adjusted the cuff of his uniform as he stood guard at the side of the courthouse, his badge catching slivers of pale morning light. Beside him, Rex sat at attention, calm but alert, tail still, eyes sharp. It wasn't the open space the dog was used to. Here, the air felt tight, full of whispers and fear that clung to the walls. Inside the courtroom, a single figure drew Daniels's attention. Lila. She sat in the front row beside a social worker, her small hands folded in her lap. She was dressed neatly, hair brushed, ribbon replaced, but her face was pale, almost translucent under the cold fluorescent light. The same eyes that had once glowed with curiosity now darted nervously toward the defendant's table. Evan Cole. The man's presence seemed to absorb the air around him. Late 30s, expensive suit. But his smirk ruined any trace of civility. His eyes, gray and narrow, followed Lila the way a snake studies a bird. Every time she glanced at him, her shoulders tensed, and she shrank a little further into the seat. Daniels felt a current of unease ripple through him. He'd seen that look before, the way victims sometimes stare at their abusers, part terror, part resignation. But this was different. There was something unspoken between them, some threat that still hung in the air, invisible to everyone but her. Rex shifted beside him. His ears twitched, nose quivering slightly. The dog's muscles were tight, coiled. Daniels knelt, resting a hand lightly on his neck. "You feel it too, huh?" he whispered. Rex gave a low hum in response, eyes fixed on Lila. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The sound of chairs scraping against tile echoed like thunder in the confined space. Lila stood, trembling. Her small hands gripped the bench for balance. Daniels could see the faint tremor in her knees. Level moderate. "Court is now in session," the judge's voice rang out. "The people versus Evan Cole." As the proceedings began, Daniels's training kicked in. His eyes scanned the room. Doors, exits, hands, faces. But his focus kept drifting back to the little girl at the front. Every time Evan's attorney spoke, she flinched. When the prosecutor called her to the stand, she hesitated so long that the bailiff had to gently guide her forward. She climbed the steps to the witness stand, her shoes squeaking faintly. The microphone loomed in front of her like an alien object. Daniels could almost feel her heartbeat from across the room. The prosecutor smiled softly. "Lila, can you tell us what you remember about the night of April 12th? Lila opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her throat bobbed. She looked at the floor, then sideways, right toward the defendant's table. Evan Cole sat with his hands clasped, an easy grin curling his lips. He lifted his wrist slightly, thumb brushing against his watch in a subtle, practiced motion. To anyone else, it would mean nothing. But to Lila, it was a warning. Her pupils dilated. The air seemed to drain from the room. I don't remember," she whispered. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor leaned forward, confused. "Lila, are you sure? You told the officer that night." "I don't remember," she repeated, louder this time, voice cracking. Daniels's gut twisted. He'd seen enough intimidation cases to know that fear didn't always scream. Sometimes, it disguised itself as forgetfulness. Rex let out a quiet whine. His gaze never left Lila. Minutes dragged like hours. The hearing continued, motions filed, objections thrown like daggers. But Daniels wasn't hearing any of it. His attention was locked on the small, trembling hands, gripping the wooden edge of the witness stand, and the silent tears forming at the corners of her eyes. When the judge called for a short recess, the social worker led Lila toward a side room for water. She looked ready to collapse. Daniels followed protocol, standing near the door, watching without intruding. Rex sat by his leg, unmoving. Through the small window in the door, he saw Evan glance back, eyes cold, smile razor thin. It wasn't the look of a man worried about conviction. It was the look of someone who believed he still had control. Daniels clenched his jaw. Something inside him stirred. The same instinct that made Rex bristle when a storm approached. When Lila returned, she stopped midway down the aisle, glancing briefly toward Daniels. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but then she lowered her head and kept walking. Rex's ears perked again. The dog's body stiffened, tail flicking once, twice, measured, deliberate. Daniels frowned. That was Rex's alert posture. But there was no obvious threat. Not yet. He crouched down beside him, whispering, "What do you see, boy?" Rex's nose turned subtly toward the defendant's bench. The recess ended. The judge re-entered. Voices filled the space again, but everything felt muted, distant. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their cold glow washing the color from every face. Lila sat back in her chair, fingers digging into her knees. Daniels could see she was fighting back tears, and still, that man, Evan Cole, kept watching her, a predator cloaked in civility. Daniels forced himself to stand still. Protocol demanded neutrality. Emotion wasn't allowed to cloud duty. But inside, his pulse quickened. The air smelled faintly of fear, the kind of scent Rex never ignored. A moment later, Evan leaned to whisper something to his lawyer. A tiny, smug laugh escaped him. That was it. Rex growled, low and guttural, a warning from deep in his chest. Heads turned. The judge rapped his gavel sharply. "Control your animal, officer!" Daniel straightened immediately. "Apologies, Your Honor. He must have sensed movement." But Rex wasn't wrong. He had sensed something unseen, crawling beneath the surface. When the hearing adjourned for the day, Daniels followed the escort as they guided the defendant away in cuffs. Evan's eyes brushed past him, and in that instant, he smiled. A small, knowing smile. Daniels's stomach tightened. As the courtroom emptied, Lila lingered near the exit, clutching her small backpack. Daniels approached slowly, kneeling to meet her eye level. "You did brave today," he said quietly. "You don't have to talk if you're scared, but you did good." Lila blinked up at him, her lashes wet. "He knows," she whispered. "He said he'd find me." Daniels froze. "When?" "Before court," she said. He smiled. The words hit him like a punch. Before he could respond, the bailiff called him back. Lila was led away down the hall. Rex watched her go, ears high, nose twitching at the fading trace of her scent. Fear, sadness, something else. Daniels stood there long after the doors shut, the echo of her words bouncing in his mind. He said he'd find me. He looked down at Rex. The dog's gaze was steady, protective, loyal. "Stay sharp, partner," Daniels murmured. "Something tells me this isn't over." And as the courthouse lights dimmed, the camera of the story would linger on that silent pair, a man and his dog, standing watch over a child who had already seen too much of the world's darkness. Because in that room, justice wasn't the only thing on trial. Trust was. The courtroom was colder the next morning. Even the sunlight filtering through the tall windows felt thin, cautious, as if afraid to disturb what was about to unfold. Officer Daniels stood at his usual post near the aisle, Rex sitting steady beside him. The low hum of murmurs filled the air, reporters scribbling notes, lawyers shuffling papers, the metallic click of handcuffs echoing somewhere behind the walls. But beneath it all, there was that same tension, That same pulse of unease only a handler and his dog could feel. Rex's ears twitched. His body remained still, but Daniels could tell his partner was on alert. Then she entered. Lila. She walked quietly beside the social worker, clutching a small stuffed toy in her hand, a faded gray rabbit with one ear missing. She looked even smaller under the fluorescent lights, her shoulders drawn in as if trying to disappear. Daniels's chest tightened when he saw her eyes, wide, rimmed red, but determined to be brave. He gave her a reassuring nod. She didn't smile, but she noticed. That was enough. When the judge called the court to order, the room fell into silence. Every creak of a chair, every shuffle of shoes sounded too loud. Evan Cole sat at the defendant's table again, calm, collected, and still wearing that infuriating smirk. His fingers drummed lightly on the wooden surface, deliberate and slow. The prosecutor began, "Lila, I know this is difficult, but you're safe here. Can you tell us what happened that night?" Lila's lips parted. I was at home." Her voice was barely audible, like a whisper trying to survive in a storm. Daniels shifted slightly, trying not to draw attention, but unable to stay relaxed. He watched her eyes. They flicked toward Evan again. The man's expression didn't change, but then, almost casually, he raised a hand to adjust his watch. His thumb tapped it twice. Subtle, controlled, warning. Lila froze mid-sentence. Her breath hitched. I don't remember," she stammered. The prosecutor leaned closer. "That's all right. Take your time." But Daniels knew that look. He'd seen it on witnesses before, people who had been threatened, cornered, silenced long before the trial began. Rex let out a quiet whine, barely audible, a vibration of concern that only Daniels could feel through the leash. The hearing continued, each word like a stone dropped into still water. When the judge finally called for a 15-minute recess, Lila stepped down from the stand. Her legs trembled, and she nearly tripped on the last step. Daniels instinctively moved forward, steadying her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You okay, sweetheart?" he murmured. She nodded quickly, avoiding his gaze. "Yes, sir." But her voice cracked, and her fingers, they were cold. As the adults busied themselves, lawyers talking in low voices, bailiffs checking doors, Lila drifted toward Rex, who was lying obediently beside the bench. She knelt beside him, stroking the fur on his neck. For a moment, it looked like nothing more than a child seeking comfort. But then Daniels noticed the rhythm. Not random, not idle. Her small hand moved with deliberate precision. One tap, pause, two quick strokes, pause, then another tap. Her fingertips brushed along Rex's foreleg, shifting his paw just slightly forward. The dog adjusted posture instinctively. Left paw out, right paw bent, tail twitching once to the side. Daniels froze. It couldn't be. The pattern was exact. The same signal he'd once jokingly taught her during a training demo months ago. Short, short, short. Long, 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 short, short, short. S-O-S. Rex glanced at Daniels, ears forward, waiting for instruction. Daniels's breath caught, rate slow. His pulse thundered in his ears. She's calling for help. But she wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She was too afraid to. The code was her only voice, the only way she could reach him without tipping off the man watching her. Daniels knelt slowly, pretending to check Rex's collar. He whispered under his breath, "You sure, girl? Is that what you're telling me?" Lila didn't answer. She just looked up at him, and in that look, he saw everything. Fear, pleading, the kind of silent desperation that no child should ever have to carry. His jaw clenched. He gave Rex the faintest nod, their unspoken confirmation. The dog stilled completely, as if awaiting the next command in a mission only they understood. Daniels rose, forcing his voice to stay calm as he spoke to another officer. "Hey, can we check the hallway cameras again? I think someone might have been hanging around near the side exit earlier." It was an excuse, a way to get eyes outside the courtroom without drawing suspicion. From the corner of his eye, he saw Evan watching, expression unreadable, but his jaw tight. The man knew something had shifted. Predators always sensed when the ground beneath them started to move. Lila petted Rex one last time, whispering something under her breath. The dog pressed his head gently against her hand before she stepped back. Daniels's mind raced. There wasn't much time. Whatever threat Evan had made, it was real and close. He leaned toward Rex, muttering, "Stay with her." Rex's tail flicked once. Acknowledgement. When court resumed, Lila sat perfectly still. But Daniels could see it. Her fingers were trembling, hidden under the table. Evan, confident again, leaned back in his chair, pretending boredom. Daniels positioned himself slightly closer, one hand near his radio, eyes never leaving the defendant. He could almost hear Rex's breathing sync with his own. Steady, ready, waiting. As the next witness took the stand, strange calm settled over the room. It was the kind of stillness that comes before lightning, the kind that hums with the promise of violence. Lila didn't move again, but the damage was done. The code had been sent, the message received. And though no one else noticed, the air in that courtroom had changed. Daniels wasn't just watching now. He was guarding, listening to every whisper, every shift of movement, every flicker of fear that crossed the girl's eyes. And Rex, loyal, intelligent, unyielding, stayed at his side like a shadow carved from instinct. The next move wouldn't come from the courtroom's arguments or the judge's gavel. It would come from the storm brewing beneath the silence. And somewhere deep down, Daniels already knew the real battle hadn't begun yet. The courtroom was too quiet, too still. Officer Daniels stood with his arms crossed, but inside every muscle was drawn tight. The air felt charged, heavy, like the moment before thunder tears the sky open. Beside him, Rex sat rigid, head slightly lowered, pupils locked on the defendant. Evan Cole, the man who smiled when everyone else looked away. Daniels's mind replayed Lila's coded gesture, the Morse pattern through Rex's posture. S-O-S. He could still see her trembling hand pressing against the dog's fur, that silent plea buried in bravery. Something was coming. Daniels touched the small radio on his shoulder, his voice calm but clipped. "Unit 3, shift position near the north door, quietly." Static crackled, then a soft reply. "Copy that." He scanned the room without moving his head. The judge was gathering documents. The prosecutor was whispering to her aide. To the untrained eye, everything looked ordinary. But Daniels saw the tension in the small things. The way Lila's fingers dug into her lap. The flicker in Evan's eyes. the faint sheen of sweat on his temple. Predators sweat before they strike. Rex gave a low growl, barely audible, a warning from somewhere deeper than instinct. Daniels rested a hand on the dog's back. "Easy, partner," he whispered. "We'll move when we have to." Then, it happened. Evan glanced at the clock. A simple, casual motion, but the kind that hides a countdown. His lawyer leaned toward him, muttering something. Evan didn't respond. Instead, he stood suddenly, fast, too fast. The chair screeched against the floor, echoing like a gunshot. "Sir, sit down," the bailiff ordered, stepping forward. Evan's eyes darted toward the rear exit. The smallest flicker of panic crossed his face. Not fear of capture, but fear of something slipping beyond his control. Then he ran. "Move!" Daniels barked. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Papers flew from the prosecutor's table, fluttering through the air like white birds startled from their perch. The social worker screamed. Spectators stumbled out of their seats. Evan sprinted for the side door, shoving anyone in his path. But Rex was faster. In a flash of muscle and motion, the German shepherd lunged across the polished floor. Claws skidding, body low, powerful. The sound, that deep rolling snarl, cut through the chaos like a blade. He hit Evan mid-run, tackling him hard enough to send both crashing into the doorframe. The impact rattled the hinges. Evan tried to twist away, but Rex held him down, teeth bared, growl rumbling like thunder over stone. Daniels was already there, weapon drawn. "Stay down!" Two other officers swarmed in, pinning Evan's arms behind his back. The cuffs snapped closed with a metallic click that felt final. For a second, silence. Only the sound of Rex's breathing. Heavy, deliberate, protective. Lila, frozen in the front row, stared in disbelief. Her stuffed rabbit had fallen from her hands, lying forgotten on the floor. Daniels looked at her and saw the tears welling in her eyes. Not from fear, but from release. It was over, or so he thought. Evan's voice broke the silence. A laugh, soft, sinister. The kind of sound that didn't belong in a human throat. He turned his head, eyes finding Lila through the tangle of uniforms. "You think you're safe?" he hissed. The words were low, venomous, meant for her alone. Lila flinched, the color draining from her face. Daniels's heart slammed against his ribs. "Get him out of here!" he barked. The officers dragged Evan toward the hall, his shoes scraping across the floor. Even restrained, he kept that awful smirk, that promise of unfinished evil. Daniels holstered his weapon and knelt beside Rex. The dog's chest rose and fell rapidly, fur bristled, eyes still locked on the departing man. Daniels pressed a steadying hand to his neck. "It's okay, buddy. You did it. You did good." Rex's tail gave a slow wag. Not happy, but resolute. Duty done. Around them, the courtroom was a mess. Papers littered the floor like snow, coffee cups overturned, chairs scattered. The judge had retreated to chambers. The jurors were ushered out. But amidst the wreckage stood one small figure, Lila, unmoving, clutching the air where her toy had been. Daniels approached slowly, kneeling to her level. "He can't hurt you anymore," he said softly. Her lips trembled. "He said that before." He looked at her, really looked at her, a child who had spent too long looking over her shoulder, who had learned to speak in silence because the world ignored her cries. Daniels took the stuffed rabbit from the floor, brushed off the dust. and handed it back to her. "Sometimes people like him try to make you believe they're still in control," he said gently. "But they're not. Not anymore." She stared at him, unsure whether to believe it. Rex stepped forward, nose pressing against her hand. That small touch broke something open. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She bent down, wrapping her arms around Rex's neck, whispering, "Thank you." Rex stayed perfectly still, letting her cry into his fur. Daniels turned away for a moment, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the doorway where Evan had disappeared. He could still feel the echo of those words. "You think you're safe?" Like poison lingering in the air. But for now, he pushed it aside. The child was safe. The courtroom had been chaos, but order was restored. Or so it appeared. Outside, through the courthouse glass, a black sedan rolled slowly past the curb. Its tinted windows concealed the driver's face. Just for a second, Daniels thought he saw movement, a camera flash, or maybe a signal. Then it was gone. He frowned. "Keep eyes outside," he muttered into his radio. "No one leaves without clearance." "Copy that," came the reply. He turned back to Lila and forced a faint smile. "You did brave today, kiddo." She sniffled, clutching her rabbit tighter. "I didn't do anything." Daniels shook his head. "Yeah, you did. You spoke loud enough for the right people to hear." She looked confused for a moment, then glanced down at Rex, understanding dawning slowly in her eyes. "Through him," she whispered. Daniels nodded. "Through him." For a long time they stayed like that. A man, a dog, and a little girl in a room that had seen too much. The chaos outside faded into background noise. Only the faint hum of the lights remained, steady and constant, like the rhythm of Rex's heartbeat. And in that stillness, Daniels realized something. This wasn't just about one trial or one criminal. It was about the way evil hides behind calm faces, the way fear silences innocence. But not today. Today a child had spoken, and a dog had listened. The precinct was quiet that night. The kind of silence that hums, not peaceful, but heavy. Outside, rain whispered against the tin roof of the K9 unit kennels, tapping like faint, nervous fingers. The city lights glowed dim through the mist, each drop scattering their reflection across the puddled ground. Inside, Officer Daniels sat on a wooden stool beside Rex's pen. His posture was tired, shoulders slumped, hands clasped loosely between his knees. He wasn't supposed to be there after hours, but sleep had become impossible. His mind replayed the courtroom chaos in jagged fragments. Evan's smirk, Lila's trembling hands, the sound of Rex's growl before the storm broke. Rex lay curled on his blanket, eyes half closed, chest rising and falling steadily. He wasn't asleep, though. Daniels could tell. His ears twitched at every sound. The rain, the creak of the old heater, the quiet sigh that escaped his handler's lips. Daniels leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You saved her, boy," he whispered. His voice carried the weight of exhaustion and something softer. Pride. "You knew before any of us did, like always." Rex stirred, lifting his head. His tail brushed the floor once, twice, then stilled. Daniel smiled faintly, but then he saw it. A small streak of dark red near the dog's paw. His smile vanished. "Hey, what's this?" He knelt closer. Under the fluorescent hum of the kennel lights, The cut looked shallow but fresh, probably from the scuffle at the courthouse door. Still, blood had matted the fur around it. Daniels frowned, reaching for the first aid kit on the shelf. "Hold still, partner." Rex obeyed without a sound. His eyes stayed on Daniels's face as the officer dabbed disinfectant gently onto the wound. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint scent of wet fur and metal. A strangely familiar comfort. Daniels worked carefully, hands steady even as memories tugged at the edges of his thoughts. The motion, cleaning, wrapping, caring, carried him backward in time. He remembered the first time he'd met Rex, a ball of fur, barely 6 months old, with oversized paws and too much energy for his own good. Back then, Daniels hadn't been ready for another partner, not after losing Mark. Mark had been more than his teammate. He'd been his brother in uniform. The explosion that took him had also taken the laughter from Daniels's days. For months, he'd gone through the motions, reports, drills, empty coffee cups, silence. The world had felt hollow. Then the department assigned him a new K-9 recruit. Rex. The pup had bounded straight into him, knocking his coffee over. Daniels had cursed under his breath. But the dog just sat there, head tilted, tongue lolling, as if daring him to stay angry. And somehow, Daniels couldn't. Not that day. Not ever after. He'd started calling him partner, half jokingly, half out of habit. But over time, it stopped being a title. It became truth. Back in the kennel, Daniels tied off the bandage and leaned back, studying the dog. "You were supposed to be a replacement," he said quietly. "But you ended up being everything else." Rex tilted his head, as if understanding. His gaze was steady, deep, and impossibly human. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming harder against the metal roof. Thunder rolled in the distance, a low, rumbling sound that made the fluorescent lights flicker once. Daniels reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small. The folded piece of paper he'd found weeks ago, back when Lila first visited the training yard. He unfolded it carefully. For Rex, because he listens. That childish handwriting, uneven and heartfelt, blurred slightly under the dim light. Daniels traced the words with his thumb. "You didn't just listen today, huh?" he murmured. "You understood her. You saved her life." Rex let out a soft huff, resting his chin on Daniels's boot. The officer chuckled quietly, though his voice cracked halfway through. "You always were the better half of this team." For a long time, neither moved. The only sound was rain, the occasional bark echoing from the far kennels, and the quiet rhythm of Rex's breathing. Daniels leaned his head back against the cold wall and closed his eyes. He could almost hear Mark's voice, teasing, gruff. "You're talking to a dog again, Dan?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah," he whispered. "And he talks back, too." The memory faded, leaving only the hum of fluorescent light. Daniels looked down again, watching Rex drift into light sleep, his paw twitching slightly, dreaming maybe of open fields or training days under the sun. But beneath the peace, Daniels felt something else, a heaviness that refused to lift. Evan's words from earlier echoed through his mind. "You think you're safe?" Daniels rubbed the back of his neck. He'd seen too many cases where monsters like Evan didn't work alone. Something about the man's eyes, that calm, deliberate confidence, suggested unfinished business. He reached out, scratching behind Rex's ear. We'll keep her safe, partner. Whatever it takes. Rex stirred, one eye opening briefly before closing again. Daniels exhaled slowly. You know, he said softly, they tell us we're supposed to train dogs not to love, that it makes them harder to control in the field. He looked down, voice lowering to a near whisper. But I think love's the reason you listen. The reason you'd run through hell for people you barely know. Outside, lightning flashed, a silent burst that illuminated the kennels in stark white. For a second, everything froze. The bandaged paw, the tired man, the loyal dog. Then darkness returned. Daniels rose, stretching stiffly. He placed the folded note on the small ledge above Rex's bed, tucking it beneath a tin badge that glinted faintly in the dim light. Rest easy, buddy. Tomorrow's a new fight. He turned off the light, leaving only the glow from the rain-slicked window. As he walked away, Rex's low, contented sigh filled the space behind him, the kind of sound that said everything words couldn't. Daniels paused at the door, glancing back one last time. You're not just my dog, he murmured. You're my family. Rex's tail thumped softly against the floor in reply. And for the first time that night, the storm outside didn't feel so cold. The morning after the storm felt softer somehow. The sun broke through the gray sky in gentle streaks, brushing the precinct windows with light that felt more like forgiveness than daybreak. The hum of the city outside had returned. Traffic, laughter, the rhythm of normal life trying to push past the memory of chaos. Inside the K-9 division, Officer Daniels sat at his desk, nursing a mug of lukewarm coffee. The night had left its mark. His eyes were tired, his shoulders heavy. But when he looked across the room at Rex, who was lying with his chin over his bandaged paw, a faint smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. You earned a break, partner, Daniels murmured. Maybe even a steak if the captain's in a good mood. Rex blinked slowly, unimpressed by the joke. His tail gave one lazy wag. The sound of the front doors opening broke the quiet. Daniels glanced up. The receptionist spoke softly to someone. A small voice, hesitant but familiar. Then came the sound of small footsteps on the tile. Lila. She appeared in the doorway, holding a piece of paper clutched tightly in her hands. Her hair was combed neatly, though one ribbon had already come loose. Behind her, the social worker smiled encouragingly, but didn't follow her in. This visit was hers to make. Daniels stood, surprise flickering across his face. Hey, look who it is, he said softly. The bravest girl I know. Lila smiled. A real one this time, small but unshaken. Hi, Officer Daniels. Hi, sweetheart. What brings you here? She walked toward him, careful not to step too close to the desks or cables scattered across the floor. When she reached him, she held out the paper with both hands. I made this, for Rex. Daniels crouched to her height and took the paper gently. It was a handmade card, drawn with colored pencils and blotches of glue where glitter had failed to stick on. It was a picture. A little girl standing beside a big German shepherd. The two of them sarmuntitus, full of hearts and stars. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, were the words, You heard me when no one did. Daniels swallowed hard. That's beautiful, Lila. Lila's eyes flicked to Rex, who had already lifted his head, ears perked. She knelt down beside him, her small hands reaching out to stroke his fur. Hi, boy, she whispered. Remember me? Rex didn't hesitate. He pushed himself up slowly, walked the few steps to her, and rested his head gently on her lap. Lila giggled, the sound pure and unguarded, like a melody cutting through weeks of silence. Daniels couldn't help but smile. "That's the first time I've heard you laugh," he said softly. She looked up, cheeks flushed. "Mom says I laugh too loud." "Your mom's wrong," Daniels replied warmly. "That's the best sound this place has heard all week." Rex huffed in agreement, earning another laugh from the girl. Around them, a few officers had paused their work, quietly watching. Tough men and women who'd seen too much. Yet in that moment, every one of them softened. There was something sacred about the sight. A child, once broken by fear, now smiling again because of a dog who'd simply listened when no one else did. Daniels crouched beside them, the handmade card still in his hand. "You know," he said, "Rex hasn't stopped looking at the door since the trial. I think he was waiting for you." Lila smiled shyly. "I was waiting too." "For what?" Daniels asked. "To say thank you," she whispered, "but also to make a promise." Daniels tilted his head. "A promise? Time guon 600 moon." She nodded, running her fingers through Rex's fur. "That when I get scared again, I'll remember this. I'll remember that I wasn't alone. Because even when nobody heard me, Rex did." Her words landed like something fragile but unbreakable. Daniels felt his throat tighten. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's a good promise, Lila. One worth keeping." For a while they stayed like that. No rush, no duty calling them elsewhere. Just the quiet hum of the precinct, the sun spilling across the tiled floor, and the bond between a man, a dog, and a little girl bound by something deeper than circumstance. After a moment, Lila reached into her small backpack again and pulled out another piece of paper, folded and a little wrinkled. "This is for you," she said. Daniels opened it. Inside was a stick figure drawing of him, Rex, and Lila standing under a big yellow sun. At the top, she had written in uneven block letters, "Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear fur." Daniels laughed softly, the sound half choked. "You're quite the artist." She shrugged, smiling. "Rex helped. I drew him first." "Well," he said, "you got his good side." Her giggle filled the room again, brighter this time. It wasn't just the laugh of a child. It was the sound of something rebuilding, something that had survived the dark and decided to bloom anyway. Rex lifted his head, eyes drifting from Lila to Daniels as if to say, "See? She's healing." Daniels scratched the dog's neck, whispering, "You did good, partner. You really did." The social worker stepped forward then, her voice gentle. "Lila, it's time to go." Lila stood reluctantly, giving Rex one last hug. "I'll come visit again, okay?" Rex nudged her hand once, tail sweeping across the floor in slow approval. She turned to Daniels, her small voice soft but steady. "You'll keep him safe, right?" "Always," Daniels promised. "Good," she said, smiling again. "Because he keeps people safe too." With that, she turned and walked toward the door, her small steps echoing down the hall. The handmade card still shimmered faintly in Daniels's hand, the glitter catching sunlight one last time before fading. He looked down at Rex. "You hear that, boy? You're someone's hero now." Rex's ears flicked. Daniels pinned the card gently to the bulletin board beside his desk, right next to his old badge photo and a faded picture of his fallen partner. It didn't look out of place. As he stood back, the room seemed a little brighter. The kind of brightness that comes not from light, but from peace. Every officer who passed by that day saw the card and smiled. Some paused. Some whispered. Because in that simple child's drawing, with its crooked hearts and glitter glue stars, they saw something too rare, the quiet miracle of being heard. And as the day faded into evening, Daniels sat once more beside Rex's kennel, a faint smile lingering on his face. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the weight of loss pressing on his chest. He felt something else instead. Hope. The peace didn't last long. It never does. For a few weeks, everything seemed quiet. Lila's laughter became more frequent during her therapy sessions, and Daniels began to believe, maybe for once, that the storm had finally passed. But in law enforcement, silence rarely means safety. Sometimes it's the space between lightning and thunder. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. Gray skies, a cold wind rolling over the city like a warning. Daniels was finishing paperwork in the precinct when the call came in. The voice on the radio was sharp, urgent. Code 97. Safe House Omega. Explosion confirmed. He froze. The coffee cup in his hand trembled. Repeat. Omega compromised. The voice crackled. Multiple casualties. Daniels's pulse spiked. That safe house wasn't random. It was where several witnesses connected to Evan Cole's trafficking case were being held. If that network had struck again. He didn't need to finish the thought. By the time he reached the scene, the air was thick with smoke and ash. The remnants of a black SUV burned by the curb, twisted metal and shattered glass littering the asphalt. Firefighters worked under the glow of red and blue lights, their silhouettes blurred by rising steam. Daniels pushed past the barricade, flashing his badge. Status? The lieutenant shook his head grimly. No survivors. We're pulling security footage, but... He hesitated. We think it's Cole's people. They're tying up loose ends. A chill ran through Daniels's veins. Then Lila, the lieutenant met his gaze. We're moving her. Tonight. By evening, a convoy of unmarked vehicles rolled through the quiet streets toward a secure facility on the city's outskirts, an old training compound converted into a temporary protection site. Daniels drove the lead car, Rex sitting upright in the passenger seat, his head out the window, nose twitching at every scent that crossed the wind. In the back seat, Lila clutched her stuffed rabbit. She was quiet, watching the world blur by in streaks of gray and blue. Her voice, when it came, was soft. Officer Daniels? Yeah? She hesitated, staring at the glass. Sometimes, I dream he's still watching me. Daniels glanced at her through the mirror. Dreams can feel real when you've been through what you have. But listen to me, okay? He's behind bars. He can't touch you now. She didn't answer right away. Then why does it feel like he's still there? Daniels looked at Rex. The dog's ears twitched, gaze fixed on the passing darkness outside. Even he seemed uneasy, as if something unseen pressed against the edges of the night. It's just the mind's way of protecting you, Daniels said finally. Sometimes it makes shadows where there aren't any. Lila hugged the rabbit tighter. But sometimes, shadows move. The words hung in the air longer than they should have. The new safe facility was quiet. High fences, motion lights, cameras at every corner. Inside, the rooms were plain but safe. White walls, sturdy locks, no windows at ground level. Daniels helped Lila settle in, making sure the security team had the perimeter covered. He carried her small bag to the bed, a few clothes, crayons, a notebook, and the rabbit. It wasn't much, but it was everything she needed to feel like a child again. "You'll be okay here," he assured her. "No one gets in or out without clearance." She nodded, tracing the stitches on the rabbit's ear. "Will you and Rex stay?" Daniels smiled softly. "You couldn't get rid of us if you tried." That earned a small laugh, but only for a second. Her eyes drifted toward the dark window. "He used to stand outside my house," she whispered. "At night. I'd see his shadow under the streetlight. Mom said it was just the wind moving the trees." Daniels crouched in front of her, steady but gentle. "That won't happen again, Lila. You're safe now. And if any shadow even thinks about coming close, Rex will chase it off." Rex lifted his head at the sound of his name, giving a low, confident bark. It made her smile again. Faint, but real. Hours later, the compound fell quiet. The team rotated shifts, the hum of security monitors filling the small command room. Outside, the wind howled softly through the chain-link fences. Daniel sat near the window of Lila's room, reading a report under the dim yellow light. Rex rested at his feet, breathing slow but alert. Lila had finally fallen asleep, her head buried beneath the blanket, one arm curled around her rabbit. Daniels watched her for a long moment, feeling something stir in his chest, the same mix of protectiveness and guilt that had followed him since the trial. He reached down, brushing his hand through Rex's fur. "Stay sharp, buddy. Just one peaceful night. That's all I'm asking." Rex gave a quiet grunt, eyes never leaving the window. Outside, the motion lights flickered. Once. Twice. Daniels frowned. "Wind," he muttered. But Rex's head snapped up, his body going rigid. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Deep, warning, primal. Daniels stood slowly, moving toward the window. The yard beyond was empty, bathed in the harsh glow of the floodlights. Nothing moved. Not the trees, not the shadows. Then he saw it. At the far edge of the fence, a dark figure stood perfectly still, just beyond the reach of the light. No movement, no sound. Just watching. Daniels's pulse quickened. He reached for his radio. "Control, this is Daniels. We may have visual movement outside the perimeter. Confirm on camera 3. Static." Then, negative. No movement detected. He turned back to the window. The figure was gone. Rex growled again, pacing near the door now, fur standing on end. Daniels whispered, "Easy, boy. Could be nothing." But even he didn't believe it. He glanced back at the bed. Lila still slept, unaware of the unease creeping in from the dark. He moved closer to the door, whispering into his radio, "Keep eyes on North Sector. I want double coverage until dawn." "Copy," came the faint reply. As the wind picked up outside, the shadows danced again against the fence, long, stretching, shapeless, and for a moment, Daniels thought he saw a faint glimmer, the reflection of eyes watching from the distance. Rex pressed his body against the door, a silent guardian between the girl and the world beyond. Daniels stared into the dark, a cold realization settling in his gut. The storm they thought had passed was only circling back. The wind had died down, but the silence that followed felt wrong, too still, too heavy. It was the kind of silence that came before something broke. Daniels could feel it crawling under his skin as he watched the dark yard through the blinds. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Rex hadn't moved from the door in over an hour. His muscles were coiled tight, eyes fixed on the window, like he could see something his handler couldn't. Every few minutes he gave a low growl, deep and steady, the kind of sound that made a man's heart rate change, without knowing why. Daniels rubbed his neck, tension crawling higher. "You're making me nervous, boy," he murmured. Rex didn't blink. The radio on his vest crackled faintly. "Unit 3, all clear. North and west sectors secured." "Copy that," Daniels said quietly, though he didn't feel reassured. He looked over at the bed. Lila was still asleep, her hand clutching the rabbit, her breathing soft and steady. Daniels sighed. Maybe it was just his nerves. Too many nights expecting the worst. Maybe. Rex barked. It wasn't the kind of bark he used for stray sounds or random movement. This one was sharp, deliberate, an alarm. Daniels was on his feet instantly. "What is it, partner?" Rex lunged toward the window, teeth bared. The floodlight outside flickered once, then died. The world outside went black. Daniel's gut clenched. "Control, I just lost power on the east perimeter. Confirm status." Static. "Control?" Before he could finish, the night shattered. The crack of gunfire exploded outside, followed by shouts, and the high-pitched echo of alarms. "Time 200 mems. Contact! South wall!" Daniels grabbed his weapon, flipping the safety off. "Stay down!" he shouted, spinning toward the bed. Lila sat up, eyes wide with terror. "What's happening?" "Get under the table now!" She scrambled across the floor, clutching her rabbit, sliding beneath the heavy steel table in the corner. Daniels positioned himself by the door, weapon raised, heart pounding in his ears. The first explosion rocked the compound. A flash of orange lit up the window, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Rex barked again, ferocious, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Stay with me, boy," Daniels called. Through the narrow window, he saw shadows moving. 2, maybe 3 figures breaching the outer fence, their rifles gleaming under the dim emergency lights. Daniels keyed his radio. "This is Daniels. Perimeter compromised. We're under assault. Lila's inside my unit. Repeat, child is inside. I need backup now." No response. Just static. The door rattled. A bullet tore through the glass, sending shards flying across the floor. Daniels ducked, returning fire. "Get down!" he shouted again, though Lila was already curled under the table, shaking. Rex growled, muscles quivering with tension. Then came the sound of boots on gravel. Closer. Heavier. The door handle twisted violently once, twice, then burst inward under the weight of a kick. 3 armed men stormed in. Daniels fired first. The flash lit the room like lightning, followed by the echoing crack of retaliation. Bullets ricocheted off metal cabinets, glass shattered, alarms wailed louder. Rex charged before Daniels could command him. He hit the first man hard, jaws locking on the attacker's arm, dragging him down. The man screamed, his gun clattering to the floor. The second swung his weapon, striking Rex across the ribs. The dog yelped, but didn't let go. "Rex!" Daniels shouted, firing again, dropping the second man with a precise shot to the leg. The third ducked behind the doorframe, spraying the room with bullets. One ripped through the edge of Daniels' vest. Another grazed the table leg where Lila hid. She whimpered, pressing her hand to the floor. 3 short taps, 3 long, 3 short. S-O-S. Even in terror, she remembered. Daniels fired again, forcing the last intruder to retreat. "We're breached. South Hall down. Request immediate evac." This time, a voice broke through the static. "Copy that, Daniels. Hold position. Reinforcements inbound." He dropped the radio and ran to Rex. The dog was still locked in combat with the first man, blood streaking his shoulder where the hit had landed. Daniels kicked the attacker's weapon away and cuffed him quickly. Rex stumbled back, panting, one paw slipping on the blood-slick floor. Daniels knelt beside him, pressing against the wound. You're okay. Just breathe, buddy. You did good." But Rex pushed away, refusing to stay down. He turned toward the door, growling low. Another movement outside. Daniels lifted his weapon again, just as the last attacker reappeared, rifle raised. He barely had time to react before Rex launched forward again, intercepting the man mid-stride. The gun went off, a deafening shot, and Rex fell hard against the ground, whimpering. "Rex!" Daniels roared, firing back until the man dropped. Smoke and dust filled the air. The alarm lights strobed red, painting everything in flashes of chaos. For a moment, all Daniels could hear was the pounding of his own heart. Then he saw Lila crawl out from under the table, crying, clutching her rabbit. "Is he—" "Time to 700, Momo." Daniels was already at Rex's side, hands shaking as he pressed against the wound. "He's fine, sweetheart. He's just hurt. Look at me, Lila. You're safe, okay? You hear me? You're safe." But her tears didn't stop. She knelt beside them, whispering over and over, "SOS, SOS," as if the code itself could bring help faster. Daniels tried to steady his voice. "You did perfect. Reinforcements are on their way." Outside, engines roared. Backup had finally arrived. Shouts echoed through the hall, boots storming in. The gunfire faded, replaced by the rush of medics and the crackle of radios. Daniels held Rex's head in his lap, feeling the dog's breath, weak but steady. Blood soaked into his uniform, but he didn't care. "You're not leaving me, partner," he whispered fiercely. "Not tonight." Rex blinked up at him, eyes glassy but alive. His tail moved once, faintly. Lila reached out, her small hand resting on Rex's paw. "You heard me again," she sobbed. Daniels swallowed hard. "Yeah, kid," he said, voice breaking. "He always does." The medics burst through the door, voices urgent but controlled. They moved to take Rex, but Daniels stayed kneeling for one more second, his hand still on the dog's chest. The lights flickered again, the alarms winding down. Outside, dawn was beginning to push through the smoke, weak, gray, but real. And in that fragile light, amidst the wreckage and the echoes of violence, one truth stood out clearer than ever. Rex had done what words could never do. He had listened. He had protected. He had loved. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of sky that made even time move slower. Daniel stood by the window, his reflection faint against the glass. A tired man in a wrinkled uniform, holding more silence than words could fill. Behind him, Rex lay on a soft white blanket, his body wrapped in bandages, one leg immobilized. Machines hummed quietly nearby, steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Every sound in the room carried weight. The rustle of paper, the click of the clock, the low hum of breath. But there was life in those breaths. Rex had survived. Barely. The bullet had torn through muscle, but missed the artery. The vet said it was a miracle. Daniels knew better. It wasn't luck. It was loyalty. The kind that doesn't think twice, doesn't weigh consequences. The kind that runs into gunfire because love commands it. He rubbed a hand across his face, eyes burning. "You stupid, brave dog," he muttered. "You just had to be the hero again, didn't you?" Rex stirred at the sound of his voice, tail twitching faintly against the blanket. Daniels moved closer, crouching beside him. "Hey, partner," he whispered, voice softer now. "You're supposed to rest. Doctor's orders." Rex blinked up at him, pupils calm, steady. There was understanding in those eyes, the same that had once read Lila's silent message, the same that had seen through every lie and every fear. Daniels felt his chest tighten. He'd spent years training this dog to obey, to protect, to fight. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this, for the slow heartbreak of watching his partner fade into retirement. The vet's words echoed in his mind. He won't be fit for duty anymore. The leg's too damaged. He'll live a good life. Just not in the field. Time 100 pshum. Not in the field. Not beside him. Daniels pressed his palm gently against Rex's chest, feeling the slow, steady rhythm beneath the fur. "You saved a little girl's life. You saved mine, more times than I can count. I guess now it's my turn to let you rest." The door opened quietly behind him. Lila. She stepped inside with a small bouquet of wildflowers and her ever-present stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm. Her shoes squeaked on the polished floor as she walked closer, her face lighting up when she saw Rex. "Hey, boy," she whispered, her voice full of warmth and relief. "You scared me." Rex's tail moved, just once, a slow wag of recognition. Lila knelt beside him, careful not to touch the bandages, and set the flowers on the table. Then she leaned in, resting her cheek against his fur. "I missed you," she said softly. Daniels smiled faintly, standing back to give them space. He watched as the girl traced the edge of Rex's paw with her small hand, the same way she had that day in the courtroom. The code that had saved her life. "Did you come to see your hero?" Daniels asked gently. Lila looked up, her eyes bright. "He's our hero," she said. "But he doesn't have to be anymore." Daniels tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She smiled. That wise, heartbreakingly pure smile only children can give. "He doesn't need to save me now, because I'm not scared anymore." The words hit Daniels harder than any bullet ever could. Lila leaned in, hugging Rex tightly, her voice a whisper lost in fur. "You don't need to save me anymore." Rex let out a quiet, contented sigh. His eyes closed slowly, his breathing deep and even. It was as if he understood, as if that single sentence had lifted the last weight from his loyal heart. Daniels turned away, blinking hard. He wasn't the type to cry in front of anyone, but this time, he didn't fight it. A single tear traced down his cheek, falling silently onto the cold tile floor. For years, he'd seen partners come and go, missions succeed and fail. But Rex had been more than a partner. He'd been the constant, the heartbeat beside him in every dark hallway, the eyes that saw truth when humans couldn't. And now, letting him go, felt like tearing out a part of himself. Lila pulled back, brushing the fur around Rex's ears. Can he still play fetch? Daniel smiled weakly. Maybe slower than before. But yeah, I think he'd like that. She grinned, wiping her eyes. Then I'll come visit. Every week. I promise. He nodded. He'd like that too. The social worker appeared at the door, signaling gently that it was time. Lila stood slowly, giving Rex one last kiss on the head. Bye, boy, she whispered. You can rest now. When she left, the room felt emptier. The air, seemed thicker. Daniel sank into the chair beside the bed, his hand still resting on Rex's fur. You hear that, buddy? He said quietly. She's okay now. You did your job. Rex's tail brushed the blanket once more. Daniel's voice trembled. You know, I used to think being a cop meant protecting people. But watching you, I realized it's more than that. It's about believing in them, even when they stop believing in themselves. He smiled faintly. Guess you taught me that. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight crept through the window, laying a soft beam across the room. Dust motes floated in the glow like tiny pieces of gold. Daniels reached out, scratching gently behind Rex's ear. Rest easy, partner, he murmured. You've earned it. Rex's eyes fluttered shut again, his breathing slow, peaceful. For the first time in weeks, there was no tension in his body, no readiness for command. Just calm. Just peace. Daniel sat there long after the nurse came and went, after the lights dimmed and the building quieted again. His hand never left the dog's side. When he finally stood to leave, he turned at the door for one last look, at the loyal friend who had turned duty into devotion and fear into faith. Good night, Rex, he whispered. You were the best of us. And as he walked down the empty corridor, his footsteps echoing softly, the camera of memory would stay behind, lingering on the loyal German shepherd resting beneath the window's gentle light, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. No medals, no ceremony, just the silent, sacred truth that every bond, the real ones, never truly end. Years slipped quietly through time's fingers. Seasons changed, cities evolved, faces grew older, but some stories never faded. They simply softened, like a photograph left in sunlight. The old precinct had long since been renovated. Officer Daniels had retired from active duty, his hair streaked with gray, his posture slower, but still proud. Rex's service photo hung framed in the Hall of Honor, the legendary K-9 who once saved a child's life. Visitors still paused in front of it, reading the brass plaque beneath. Rex, loyalty beyond words. But the real story, the one that mattered, lived far from the precinct walls. It lived in a small classroom on the edge of town, where sunlight poured through open windows and the laughter of children replaced the sound of sirens. Inside, Lila stood before a group of kids sitting cross-legged on the floor. She was older now, mid-20s, calm, confident, with the same gentle eyes that once trembled with fear. Her hair was tied back neatly, and around her neck hung a small silver pendant in the shape of a paw print. At her side lay a rescue dog, a sandy-colored shepherd mix named Hope, wearing a blue therapy vest. The animal sat patiently, eyes bright and ears perked, mirroring the calm warmth in Lila's own posture. "Okay," she said softly, smiling down at the kids. "Who remembers what I told you last week about communication?" A small boy raised his hand eagerly. "That dogs don't use words. They use feelings." Lila laughed. "Exactly right, Ben. Dogs don't talk like we do. But if you listen the right way, if you feel what they're saying, you'll understand everything." She knelt beside Hope, giving a soft hand signal. The dog instantly responded, lowering her head and placing a paw gently on Lila's knee. The children gasped in delight. "You see that?" Lila said. "I didn't say a word. She just knows." A girl in the front row whispered, "It's like magic." Lila's smile softened. "It's not magic," she said quietly. "It's trust." Her eyes drifted to her desk, to a framed photograph sitting near the edge. The picture was slightly faded from time, but the image was clear. Officer Daniels, kneeling beside Rex, both looking at the camera with quiet pride. Rex's eyes still carried that same intelligence, that same fierce love. Lila's voice grew softer as she turned back to the class. "I learned that lesson a long time ago, from someone very special, a dog named Rex." The class ended soon after. The children filed out, chatting excitedly, the sound of laughter filling the hallway. Hope followed Lila to the desk, tail wagging. Lila picked up the framed photo of Rex and Daniels, tracing a finger gently over the glass. The reflection of the afternoon sun caught Rex's eyes, and for a moment they seemed alive again, bright and knowing. "Still keeping an eye on me, huh?" she whispered. In the quiet, a distant sound seemed to echo in her mind. Faint, rhythmic. 3 short pulses, 3 long, 3 short. S-O-S. But it didn't feel like a cry for help anymore. It felt different, gentler, fuller. "Safe," she murmured. "Our souls." Lila set the photo back down and looked out the window. The wind stirred the leaves outside, carrying the laughter of children from the playground below. The sky had that same soft gold hue she remembered from years ago, the day she first met the dog who had changed everything. Fade out. Sometimes, stories like Rex's remind us what words can't, that love doesn't always speak, it listens. German shepherds have that rare gift, loyalty that doesn't waver, understanding that doesn't need translation, and hearts that never judge. They stand beside us in silence, yet somehow say everything we need to hear. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that quiet connection, that you and me against the world feeling, then you already know what I mean. It's more than companionship. It's family. If you'd like to explore ways to strengthen that bond, there's a resource I often recommend. Something gentle, genuine, and made for people who truly love their dogs. You can take a look whenever you feel ready. It's helped me see just how much our dogs try to understand us, every single day. Because at the end of it all, they don't just guard our homes. They guard our hearts, faithfully, silently, and forever.